Thank you, Tino. Good morning, everybody, and good morning to the one that are attending online. So the starting point here is the third scenario InteropEHRate project that is about the research. We start with a population of patients that have a collection of clinical data on their smartphone. And then they are willing somehow to trust the system and to share, donate their health data to research. On the other hand, we have also research organization, and they define research protocol, they run research protocol and deduct the results from data collected. We wanted to support the effort spent for the patient selection, but also for data collection. Oops, took twice, okay. We started with some initial hypotheses for the scenario, and then we consulted the experts. We consulted the researcher. We set up researchers focus groups composed by professionals, of course, researchers in different settings, from pulmonology to cardiology up to surgery, and coming from the 4 hospital partners of the project. And we ran 3 cycles of these 4 focus groups and analyzed different model of research, starting from the epidemiological studies, which is almost retrospective, and up to the experimental trials, drugs, medical devices, also cohort studies, which is essentially prospective, but contains also a part of retrospective data collection. During the focus group, they express some desire. So they want the ability to reach the patient directly through the smartphone, and also to send personal results for the patient or global results for the research. They would like also to receive statistical information about the matching rate, how many patients can fulfill the criteria that I define on the research, and how can I evaluate the size of these potential cohorts. They would like also, in a multi-center study, in an international study, manage the patient localization, not the precise localization, just to understand if the patient might have a center in the nearby to use as a reference center. And the final point is that since they know that they can collect information coming from other sources, other hospitals, other healthcare providers, they want to maintain the reference to this source in order to have some kind of reliability expressed on this data with this reference. Of course, they like very much the idea of getting data directly from the patient, let me say almost effortless. And they like the possibility to apply directly the patient for a study using the smartphone. And about the localization, we need to remember that some epidemiological studies, large studies, don't need to manage localization at all. So they, of course, can work with large cohorts, anonymous cohorts of patients. On the other hand, experimental trials need to have a local population, sometimes smaller, much smaller than the one used in the epidemiological studies, but the population that they need to treat, they need to visit. So the final results is that also from the focus group of patients that we had for the other 2 pilots, patients would like to be involved in research study, but they express they're willing to donate data when the research is addressing their own condition. So they're interested in their health, okay? And they are anyhow worried about potential data leak. So this is the trust level that we discussed earlier on. Researcher, on the other hand, would like to have a tool that supports any aspects of the research study. The base concept that stands behind the thing that we developed in InteropEHRate is this virtual network, physical network, and network, an open research network composed by patients and research organizations. They share and they exploit a common IT infrastructure, but also some rules, data protection, data security. And the networks allow the researcher to enroll directly the patient and the researcher to express some constraint that can be used in the network must share common set of vocabularies. So we might use, of course, international vocabulary, but also local vocabulary that can be approved locally for that study. In this schema, we have a multi-centric study where two different organizations, research organization, one principal investigator and one center that is the reference for the study, can both enroll patients. Of course, the principal investigator has certain responsibility for the whole study, but we have also some responsibility for the local patient. We developed for the third pilot of InteropEHRate a real research study called Interval, which is an acronym, Interoperate Validation. The primary objective of this study, which is a prospective study, multicentric study, of course, and observational study, was to install basically the smart EHR on the patient phone and collect information coming from the data, health data contained in the smart EHR. But we have also secondary objective. The first one is very clinical, which is the proof of concept that we can use the information that we collect for some real results, clinical results, and some kind of results related to data quality. The inclusion criteria, briefly, we have a patient with more than 18 years, of course, and patient with hypertension, primary hypertension, secondary hypertension, and treated with antihypertensive drugs. Of course, they need to provide the informed consent and to understand the informed consent. The exit criteria, exclusion criteria is more or less the opposite. So, of course, cannot be provided any kind of consent, or the patient has a kind of disease, just like dementia, cognitive decline, that exclude the patient from this study. This is what we can do in, let me say, paper words. We have a case report form defined where we collect the information, the researcher compile that form, and then have to maintain basically this paper form and enter also information in another electronic IT tools. What we define here is a set of data and the electronic format of this. So we collect age and gender, year of hypertension, some vital signs, and something that is, let me say, really interesting for a research protocol. Since the collection of images and signals is really heavy for a researcher, for a research center, because it takes a lot of time to select the image, to select the study, to anonymize the study, to send the study to the reference center. Here we define an automatic extraction of the study, selected according to this kind of constraints, and then the transmission of the study to the research center. Not only, this is an example, an echocardiogram, which is a DICOM 5, and the text report, important as well, but also an electrocardiogram, which is a DICOM waveform file or a PDF file. Of course, a PDF is not processable, but at least we can do something with the signal. And the list of medication that is contained and managed within the SmartEHR. Then we have a couple of things that is not normally contained on the smartphone, which is 2 questionnaires. This is the first questionnaire related to side effects. We collect basically the name of the drug which produce hypothetically the side effect, because we never know which is the right drug that produces that side effect. Anyway, we are focusing here just on one drug, the symptoms produced, and if they have that effect for a certain amount of time, did they replace the drug? Did they withdraw the drug? Did they have some treatment related to the symptoms? And another questionnaire, which is not going forward. Could you please? Okay. Oh, no. The previous one. Yep. Okay, this one. This is a feedback from the patient. Is the system useful? Is the system usable? Something like this, and some other things related to the usage of application, the usage of internet. All the things that you have just said was reported in this structure, the research definition document. The research definition document is the way for the researcher to express constraints for the research that would like to be executed on the smartphone. So we have the study A, represented in the natural language, might be several. We just give a look to the long list of languages supported by Andaman, the selection criteria, inclusion, which disease, include which disease for exclusion, exit criteria, which is something that occurs during the execution of the study, starting and ending dates, but also requested data, DICOM file, and latest echocardiogram, or the questionnaire that you just seen and expressed, for example, the question in the natural language of the patient, and the principal investigator, of course, the reference center or the principal investigator center, and finally, information document. So we have the consent for each possible language that we might want to apply, and this is related to the center that we are involved in. So in our study, we had 4 versions of the informed consent because of the 4 countries that was used within the smartphone to display the correct document to the patient to describe the research study, and of course collect the consent. In the definition of the RDD, we also provide some powerful functionalities. The powerful functionality is here applied in the selection or exclusion criteria. If I want to include all the hypertensive patients, I need to specify a long list, not so long actually, but a list of diseases in ICD-9 or ICD-10. Here we did both. We used both coding systems because we might have the same patient classified by one general practitioner or hospital in ICD-9. In Italy, we use ICD-9, or in Belgium with ICD-10. So to include the patient, we need to report both constraints. So this is basically the usage of wildcards. And this simplifies a lot the work for researchers. The other point is, waiting for the next slide, okay, data requirements. If I want to collect all the drugs the patient is doing according to some other constraints, and here we use the ATC coding systems, the hypertensive drugs starts with the C02, but also 03, 5, and 9. I don't have to report the 90 active principles that we want to select. on the patient phone. I just need to use some kind of wildcard system. So basically, this is a simplification of the expression for the researcher in order to execute that study correctly for each smartphone. Finally, we define also some kind of functionality to fulfill the GDPR minimization principles. Because when we require patient demographics, FHIR essentially can provide us this whole set of information related to person. If I want to collect only, just like we did, gender and birth date, we need to specify this in the RTD, and the smartphone is capable to somehow provide extracting the information coming from the person resource in FHIR, only the two fields, and send to the research center just these two fields. And this is the implementation of the minimization principle as stated in the GDPR. So this is just brief hints and experience that we had in the evolution of the InteropEHRate pilot 3 or research scenario. And now we will see something a little bit technical by Gabor, right?